Hello and welcome. So I've had a few requests to do some makeup collection videos. So I thought that was a really fun idea, and because I have quite a large makeup collection, I thought it would make the most sense to break it down into categories. And I wanted to start off today with one of my smaller categories, I think, which is cream and liquid highlighters. So if you'd like to see my whole collection of cream and liquid highlighters, just keep on watching. So here's an overview of all my cream and liquid highlighters. I have organized most of my makeup into these little boxes. They're from Glossy Boxes. Last Christmas, one of my sisters got me a 6-month subscription to Glossy Box, and I found that the boxes have been really useful for actually storing my makeup. So I have all of my cream and liquid highlighters here in this little box, and it just makes it really easy for me to find what I'm looking for. I have most of my other makeup in containers like this as well, which you'll see as time goes on. But let's get right into these highlighters. So starting out, I have 3 shades of the Westman Atelier Lit Up highlight sticks that I use as highlighters. I also have 1 shade that I use as a cream bronzer, and I think I'll save that one for when I do my bronzer collection. So let's just stick to things that I actually use as highlighters first. So I'm going to swatch the 3 shades of these here. This one is Nectar, so that's a nice peachy shade. It's right there on my hand. A lot of these are going to be pretty hard to see in swatches because they're, quite sheer formulas, and because they're highlighters, they're light colors as well. But we'll do our best to take a look at everything. And then up top here, that's the shade Lit. It's this one, and it has some kind of like purple blue tones in it. So that makes it a really nice kind of icy looking highlighter. And then the middle swatch here, which is a more champagne-y color, is the shade Pärla from the Lit Up sticks. This one was a limited edition in the 2021 holiday box that Westman Atelier did, but hopefully they'll be bringing it out as a permanent part of the line at some point, because it might be my favorite one. My favorite kind of just depends on my mood and the type of look I'm going for, and I do love all of these shades. So these are the 3 Westman Atelier Lit Up highlight sticks that I use as highlight. One other highlighter that's in a stick form, so I thought I'd show that in with the Westman Atelier ones. This is the Merit Highlighting Balm in the shade Cava. That's what that looks like. And there it is in that long swatch along my hand there. It's actually different from any of these ones. It's kind of like if you mixed all of these shades together, you might get something like Cava. It has a coolness to it, but it also has a little bit of warmth. And so to me, it's more of a neutral tone, but depending on the way that it shifts, you can see those different undertones in it. I think the next grouping to show you is liquid highlighters in bottles. So I have, I think, 4 here to show you. The first is this Tom Ford Glow Drops. This is the shade 03 Reflects Guilt. Now this was part of a big holiday collection they did a couple of years ago, I think 2019 holiday. And so I don't know if this is one that's still available or not, but it comes out in this little dropper form. The bottle is glass, it's very nicely presented, and this is what the shade looks like. So Reflects Guilt, I would say, is definitely an appropriate name for it. It definitely has that yellowy gold quality to it. I think it's more of a neutral tone, although it has the yellow in it. It's more of like a cool yellow, which to me then brings it into kind of a neutral zone. But it's a really nice color. I find it a little bit dark for me sometimes and a little bit yellowy sometimes. It's not one that I go to all that often, but it's one that actually, now that I'm looking at it, I feel like I should bring it out more because it's a really beautiful color. It has a very smooth finish, and now that I'm looking at the yellowness of the tone, I'm thinking this might actually be a good mix in for some of my foundations that are too pinky. Something like the NARS Light Reflecting Foundation. I have it in the shade Oslo, and although the lightness of it is pretty good, it's way too pink on me. And so it does have to be mixed with something else, but I'm thinking maybe the yellowness of Reflect's Gilt would be a good combo for that one. The next one here is Chanel. It's the Chanel LeBlanc Rosy Light Drops. And I think that's it. The shade, it's rosy, so that's what the shade is. And you can definitely see it has that pink quality to it. Very pretty, kind of similar to the Tom Ford in terms of the texture. The Tom Ford might be a little bit thicker feeling, but they have a similar thing going on with those two. The next one I'm going to swatch is the Lisa Eldridge Elevated Glow in the shade Crystal Nebula. Now she is coming out with a new shade that she's already shown on her channel called Pink Moon, which is meant to be, I think, lighter than Crystal Nebula, which is currently the lightest shade, and it's a little bit more cool toned because this one is quite warm, as you can see even just looking at it in the bottle. So let's swatch that one. Again, I have another shade of this. I have the shade Solar Light, but I'll save that for the bronzer video because that's another one like the Brûlée shade of the Westman Atelier that I use as a liquid bronzer rather than as a highlighter. And there's Crystal Nebula from Lisa Eldridge. So you can see, even compared to the Tom Ford, which I was saying is, you know, a little bit yellow and a little bit warmer, Crystal Nebula looks even darker than that, almost has a bit of a more kind of orangey pull to it. All right, next up I have two of the Kevyn Aucoin Glass Glow Face. This is a very interesting formula. It's quite different from any of the other liquid or cream highlighters that I have. It's a very, for lack of a better word, quite greasy feeling formula. It's not the kind of thing that ever sets down. Those three that I just showed you, they all set down to dry down on the skin and don't leave a balmy feel on it. But these two Kevyn Aucoin ones definitely don't dry down and leave that balmy texture on the skin, but they give you that glass glow, just like the product name implies, like no other product. So if you're really looking for that really glassy, super dewy skin look, these are the perfect product for that. So the top shade there is this one, which is called Crystal Clear. So that's one that's quite similar to the Westman Atelier Lit shade. I might as well swatch that too. They have this kind of white or clear base to them, but a cooler, icier reflect with kind of purple and blue notes in it. So that's the Lit shade, and then that's Crystal Clear. And then this one here is the shade Prism Rose. So that's more of a rose gold shade. For me, I don't really use that on its own as a highlighter. It actually looks really nice when it's mixed together with the other shade of that formula, and they create together kind of a nice beigey tone. When they're mixed together, you can see them right there. They create a really nice beigey tone that almost matches my skin tone exactly, so it's a really nice combination to use. This is something I don't use that often, and I found my favorite way to use it is actually underneath foundation. It works extremely well underneath something like the Lisa Eldridge foundation because it's super dewy and super moisturizing. Again, it's not something that's going to set down or dry down, so it's going to maintain that sort of moisturized quality and look and texture throughout wearing it. But if you cover it up with something like a more matte foundation, like that Lisa Eldridge one, that's one that really likes to go matte on me. It works really well on top of it because it will then set it down by virtue of having, you know, that more matte texture on top of it. But the kind of creamy dewiness of this is still able to shine through that, and it gives me the intense moisturization that I really like to have under a drier foundation like that one. I would say the lit up sticks from Westman Atelier are a little bit more similar to the Kevyn Aucoin in that sense because they have that more balmy texture, and they do work really well under that type of a foundation as well. But the Westman Atelier are a much thinner formula, and they do actually kind of set down and really sink into the skin over time in a way that the Kevyn Aucoin don't really do. So next I'm going to show you the Auric Glow Lust. This is an absolute holy grail product for me. I use this almost every time I do makeup. Not every time, but it seems to find a way to work its way into my routine most days. That's what it looks like. you can see that it has this really smoothing quality. It even has a fair amount of coverage for a product like this. So it has enough pigment in it that it's actually adding a bit of coverage, a bit of blurring and smoothing to the skin. And it's a really beautiful tone. This is the shade Morganite, which is the reformulated Morganite. The previously released Morganite shade was darker than this, and to me it was quite a lot warmer toned. So they cooled it off a little bit and lightened it by 10%. And this is the result, and it's a perfect shade for really fair skin like mine. So I'm super happy with it. This is definitely a product that I would repurchase once I go through it. I'm about halfway through the bottle already, and it's something that's great as a primer underneath makeup. It's great on its own. You know, it's quite shiny, so you might not want it all over your face without putting anything else over it that's gonna tamp down that shine a little bit, but it can still work in that way if that's the look you're going for. But it's also really great mixed in with foundations. I love to mix this with more matte foundations, both to kind of sheer them out a little bit. It's not going to sheer them out to a huge degree because it does have that pigment level, but it will still tone down the pigment in a very highly pigmented foundation formula, but it also adds a really beautiful shine and a little bit more glide to more matte foundation formulas. It also works great as just a cream highlighter on the cheekbones. I tend not to use it that way all that much, but it works beautifully in that way as well. So that's the Auric Glow Less in Morganite. And then I wanted to show you this La Mer, the Hydrating Illuminator. This is something I actually need to look up the ingredients on because I'm not sure if it has hyaluronic acid in it. I think I looked it up and it doesn't, but before I use it again, I would have to double check on that just to make sure. And this is one, it has kind of a similar texture to the Auric. It's a little bit thinner though. It doesn't have that same level of pigment in it, but it has similarities in the texture of it and even the look of it on the skin. This is another one that I think really smooths the skin out beautifully, and it's one that I would use in a similar way to the Auric as a primer, or just on its own, or even mixed in with foundations to change the finish and the texture of them a little bit. It's a lighter tone. It looks white when you squeeze it out, but when it's blended, it's just kind of like a pale, cool beige, I would consider it, and definitely lighter than the Morganite shade. The La Mer, if you look closely, does have some little pink iridescent reflects in it as well. It also has a scent. To me, it's a really nice scent. It's a scent that's in a number of La Mer makeup products, so I like it. But if you're really sensitive to fragrance, you might not want that one. I don't know if it's even still available. It seems to be the kind of product that kind of pops up and then goes away and then pops up a few months later. So if it's not available right now, it might be available again later in the future. Now let's do highlighters in tubes. I have 3 of them here. I'm going to start with the Fenty Beauty. This is a fairly recent release. This is the Liquid Kilowatt Fluid Freestyle Highlighter in the shade 02 Vintage Velour. And then before I blend out the Fenty one, I'm going to squeeze out this one. This is the Chantecaille Liquid Lumiere in the shade Sheen. Very similar component and texture to these 2 products. So there's the Fenty one, and there is the Chantecaille in Sheen. So again, Vintage Velour for the Fenty and Sheen for the Chantecaille. I think the shades look pretty similar. The formulas to me are quite similar as well. They're a little bit of a kind of thicker feel, but they'll sheer out and blend out as you work with them. The shades are fairly similar. I think that the Fenty has a touch more of a pink pull to it, and Sheen is looking like a little bit more of a neutral champagne tone. But there are a lot of similarities between those 2. And honestly, I don't use these ones all that often. I tend to go more for the cream highlighters or something like the Auric in a more liquid form as more of a priming or a mixing type of product, whereas these ones, I think they're a little bit too shimmery shiny to mix into a foundation for me, and similarly to like wear as a primer. I'm not sure I want that all over my face, so they would be reserved more for just the tops of the cheekbones, like a traditional highlighter, but I just don't tend to reach for these ones all that often. But looking at them, they're really beautiful, and it's probably something I should make more of an effort to incorporate into my routine. Something similar to that in that I don't use it all that often, but I should use it more often because it's so beautiful, is the Daniel Sandler. This is the watercolor liquid cheek color in the shade Moon Glow. I think it's going to be a similar shade to these other two that I have here. It's an incredibly liquidy formula. You can see it's already dripping down my hand, and it blends out really nicely, but you do have to just be a little bit careful when you're working with it because it has such a liquidy texture. It has almost kind of like an oily feel, but it does dry down, and the sheerness of it is really beautiful. It's another one that gives a really nice glassy look to the skin. The formula I don't think is at all similar to the Kevyn Aucoin Glass Glow, but I think that the end result and just the way the finish looks is sort of similar in that really kind of glassy effect, although this one is not quite as wet looking as the Kevyn Aucoin. So I just have 3 left. The first one I wanted to show you is the Dominique Cosmetics Skin Gloss. I have it in the shade Golden Dew. This was really the first cream highlighter that I really fell in love with, and I think it's amazing. I haven't used it in a long time because I've just been trying so many other ones since I got this one, but it's really beautiful. It's a traditional feeling cream highlighter, and it has a kind of yellowy sheen, sort of similar to that Tom Ford one that I showed you at the beginning, but this is paler and cooler. It's just going to be a little bit easier for someone with fair skin to wear. So that's Golden Dew from Dominique Cosmetics right there. The next one is from Minori. This is the shade Champagne in their cream highlighter formula. This one is rather dry to the touch actually, but it kind of warms up and softens up with the heat of your skin. And that's what that one looks like right there. So I personally find it a little bit dark for me to wear really easily. Like I prefer something like the Dominique because it's just a little bit lighter, but this is still wearable for fair skin. It's just something that I have to be a little bit more conscious about and maybe use a little bit lower down on the cheek rather than trying to get that real pop of light at the top of the cheekbone. But the finish of it is really beautiful, very, very smooth, very easy to work with and blend out either with a brush or just with your fingers. So that's the Minori Champagne Cream Highlighter. And then the last one, unfortunately, this is not available anymore, but this is a very beautiful product. This is the La Mer The Glow Highlighter. It's a duo actually, so it has a powder and a cream in it. I've used the cream down to the pan. It really didn't take me long to get to that. It's a very soft formula. That's what it looks like on my finger. Beautiful tone for fair skin. And there it is on the hand. So you can see even in the swatch, it's very soft. Like you can barely see it. I don't want to use too much of it because I'm right down to the bottom of the pan there. And I know I can't get it again, but it's really beautiful. It gives a very ethereal, natural, incredibly beautiful glow on the skin. I'll swatch the powder just so you can see that as well, although it's not obviously a cream or liquid. That's that right there. So that I use more as kind of a blush topper because it's really too dark for me as a highlighter, but it's beautiful as well and super, super soft, kind of reminiscent in terms of the feel of that powder to the Becca highlighter. So almost that kind of thick, creamy powder highlighter feel. I just remembered I have 2 highlighters from Salt New York, so I'm gonna go grab my palette and just show you those, and that'll wrap up this video. Here are my 2 Salt New York highlighters. This one here is Pearl and this one is Beige. So you can see that Pearl is the lighter shade and Beige is just a little bit deeper. But let's see how they swatch. I love to actually pair these together. Pearl is quite bright, but it's not like white on the skin. It's like just a super, super pale champagne, the palest champagne shade I've ever seen. So there's Pearl and there's Beige. The texture of these is beautiful and they really pop on the skin. I think these are a phenomenal highlighter formula. And I go through phases with my Salt New York where sometimes I'm using them every day, and then sometimes I just get in the habit of using other highlighters and not pulling out my Salt palettes, but I always inevitably go back to them and love them every time. So I just mixed the two shades together there so you can see what they look like. These I would say are actually the most similar to the one in the La Mer palette. This one in the La Mer is a little bit more emollient, a little bit softer feeling to the touch, and probably has a little bit less of the kind of shimmer in it. But I think in terms of the effect on the skin and also the shades, the Salt are the most similar to that one. The Dominique one, although I still consider it a traditional type of cream highlighter, it's much more balmy feeling than the other ones that I've just spoken about. So that's it for this video. That is my whole liquid and cream highlighter collection. Let me know if you have any questions or comments. I always love to see those. If you'd like to see more from me and you haven't subscribed to my channel already, I would really love for you to do so. Thank you so much for watching. Take care, and I'll see you in my next video.